Huh?
How did you even get over here?
Why?
Where did you go?
My hair looking like.
I don't have a piece of my favorite.
Did you even ever turn your book in?
I can see yesterday, right there. It was right there.
Yesterday. No. You can join first. Snacks is secondary. Hi everybody. So in this video, I want to show you what I do in my classroom to try to get students to think about what they're doing, to remember what they've learned, and to create their own content. So in my lessons, I like to incorporate a lot of technology and to get them to think and to strategize how to come up with the steps that they need for quadratic functions or whatever we use, okay, whatever concept we're going over in class. So right here, I had students start to answer the question by using what they know. Okay, so they had to factor the numerator. And then I showed them that you need to make sure that you understand how to use either the FOIL method, the box method to recreate what you started with. So you are sure about what you are doing. And then we move into using technology to check those results. At this point, what I tried to get them to see is how the quadratic function is not just a quadratic function. It actually means something. There's actually reasons why we learn how to factor. Now, on the actual exam, they are allowed to use Desmos, but they also have TI-84 calculators. So it takes a little bit to get them to realize that y is the same thing as f of x. And because I want all of my students to eventually take calculus, I have them put it in as f of x. And then, of course, what I try to get them to see is that the quadratic function has zeros. I re-explain that the x-intercept is what these zeros, like what it really means, right? And then, of course, I want them to recognize that the shape is a U and that it crosses the x-axis at the x-intercepts. And then relate that to the factors that you found in the original question, right? When we simplify. And then, of course, I wanted them to recognize that y is the same thing as f of x and that the parabola or the quadratic function is not the same thing as a line, that it's different, distinctly different. The next thing that I did was I made sure that students understood how we came up with the factors based on simple numbers, no letters, and how we ended up with negative 28 and the middle term, which was minus 3x. Now, don't forget that I was using a student screen. I still use Zoom to make sure that students are leading in class. So I had to make sure that the students recognize where they get the solutions, because students are always worried about the answer. And so where can you get the answers? But you have to be careful when you're using the zeros compared to what you actually have as the factors. Next, I made sure that they identified these points as the x-intercepts and relearn the vocabulary of how or what the x-intercepts mean. They cross the x-axis. They don't touch, they cross. And then, of course, we had to be sure that we go back to the question from the released items on their standardized test, and just to refocus what we are talking about, where we're going, where we came from, and to remind them of the actual question that we began with. So then I review one more time how we factor, how we answer the question, and then their job is to create their own question. And then in the end, using the factored form, you create your own question. And I specifically told them, do not use my example. I showed them how to duplicate in Desmos and then write in factored form. Something new, but then to use the factors that they came up with based on knowing where to find the x-intercepts. How to do the problem in a backwards way. So they can be sure that they were correct. And then they were trying to go into the y-intercept. And I was like, no, let's not worry about the y-intercept right now. But as you can see, the student was trying really hard to mess with the y-intercept. I was like, no. And then as you can see, after much trial and error, me modeling for them what I wanted them to do, how you actually figure this out, and change the colors and use some of the settings in Desmos. They then have to learn from themselves how to properly answer an open-ended question on their state exam. And finally, they have to create a Google Doc and replicate the same kind of question. So I'm teaching them some other skills like typing in Google Docs and creating Google Docs and sharing Google Docs and copying Google Docs. So thank you for watching. Please let me know if you would like to see something in my videos. I will be sure to do it.